Welcome back to Cybersecurity HQ. You know, it's only January 5th,
Yeah.
and we're already seeing some pretty intense developments in the cyber world.
Yeah, definitely.
In fact, a recent ransomware attack on a New York hospital compromised over 670,000 patient records.
Wow.
That's social security numbers, medical records, payment data, the works.
Oof, that's rough.
It really drives home the point that these aren't just abstract threats we're talking about. This is your data, folks, and it's more vulnerable than ever.
No kidding.
Okay, let's unpack this. Today, we're deep diving into a mix of breaking news and some deeper trends that are shaping the cybersecurity landscape. We'll be talking about everything from the loss of a true cybersecurity pioneer to the latest AI jailbreak techniques, malicious code hiding in plain sight, and even international disinformation campaigns.
Sounds like we've got a lot to cover.
We do.
It's a sobering reminder that the threat landscape is constantly evolving and becoming more sophisticated.
It really is. Let's start by acknowledging the passing of Amit Yoran, the CEO of Tenable, at the age of 54. His work has had a massive impact on the cybersecurity industry.
Absolutely. From founding NetWitness to heading up RSA security, and even directing the U.S. Homeland Security's cyber division. Yoran's vision and leadership were instrumental in shaping the security solutions we rely on today.
You know, it's interesting to think about how many of the tools and strategies we take for granted now were actually pioneered by someone like Yoran. It's a reminder that the field is constantly evolving, and we're building on the foundations laid by those who came before us.
I agree.
His passing is a significant loss for the cybersecurity community, but it's also a call to action for all of us to continue his work and push the boundaries of what's possible in cybersecurity.
For sure.
Okay, enough of the somber stuff. Let's get into some of the breaking news. Android users, you might want to pay close attention to this next story. There's a new malware variant making the rounds, and it's pretty sneaky.
Tell me more.
Talking about FireScam, yeah, which disguises itself as Telegram Premium and lurks on phishing sites that mimic the Rustore App Store.
So it's like a wolf in sheep's clothing.
Exactly. It's basically preying on people who are looking for a good deal or a trusted app,
Right.
tricking them into downloading something malicious.
I see.
And once it's on your phone, it can exploit permissions to steal data, track your behavior, and even establish persistence. It even uses Firebase services and a backdoor for communication, which shows a concerning level of sophistication.
Firebase. Really? I mean, I understand attackers using legitimate services to try and fly under the radar, but using a Google service like that seems pretty bold.
It speaks to their growing confidence and willingness to push the boundaries. We're seeing this trend across the board, with attackers becoming increasingly sophisticated and brazen in their tactics.
So what can Android users do to protect themselves from this kind of threat?
Well, aside from being extra cautious about what they download, the usual advice applies. Stick to official app stores, be wary of links from unknown sources, and scrutinize app permissions before granting them. And of course, keep your device and apps updated to patch vulnerabilities.
Solid advice.
Switching gears to a different platform, we've got some news for Windows users, particularly system administrators. There's exploit code circulating for a critical LDAP vulnerability, CVE 2024-49113. With a CVSS score of 7.5.
Oh no!
And to make matters worse, this vulnerability comes on the heels of another critical LDAP flaw, CVE 2024-49112, which had a CVSS score of 9.8 and was only just patched in December.
2 critical LDF flaws in such a short time frame?
Yeah.
That's a bit concerning.
Hold on. For those of us who aren't fluent in vulnerability jargon, can you quickly explain what LDAP is
Yeah,
and what a CVSS score means?
of course. LDAP, or Lightweight Directory Access Protocol, is essentially a way for applications to access information from a directory service, like a list of users and their permissions. And a CVSS score, or Common Vulnerability Scoring System, rates the severity of a vulnerability on a scale of 0 to 10, with 10 being the most critical.
So we're talking about two very serious vulnerabilities that could potentially give attackers control over entire networks.
Right, precisely. Unpatched servers are at a high risk of denial of service attacks, and even complete domain compromise. Patching these vulnerabilities needs to be an absolute priority.
You know, it almost feels like every week there's a new critical vulnerability that needs patching. It's a constant race against the clock for sysadmins.
It's true, but that's the nature of cybersecurity. We're dealing with a constantly evolving threat landscape. But I have to say, sometimes it feels like Microsoft is playing catch-up with these vulnerabilities.
Yeah, I see your point. It does raise questions about their security development lifecycle and how these vulnerabilities are being addressed. But let's not get sidetracked. We've got a lot more ground to cover. Let's talk about something a bit different. International disinformation campaigns.
Okay.
The U.S. has just sanctioned several Russian and Iranian groups for running disinformation campaigns targeting U.S. elections.
Here we go again. It seems like every election cycle we're dealing with this kind of interference.
It does.
But what's interesting is that these campaigns are becoming increasingly sophisticated. They're using deepfakes, fake
Yeah.
news sites, and even AI-generated content to manipulate narratives and sow discord.
It's becoming incredibly difficult for people to discern what's real and what's fabricated online. And the potential impact on democratic processes is enormous.
I agree.
And it's not just elections that are being targeted. We're seeing disinformation campaigns used to spread propaganda, undermine trust in institutions, and even incite violence.
It's a constant battle to stay ahead of these evolving tactics. We need to develop better tools and strategies for detecting and countering disinformation. And we need to educate the public about how to critically evaluate information online.
Absolutely. We need to equip people with the skills to be more discerning consumers of information. But let's circle back to the ransomware attack we mentioned earlier, the one that hit Richmond University Medical Center. Over 670,000 individuals had their data compromised.
And it wasn't just any data. We're talking about social security numbers,
Right.
medical records, and payment data, the kind of information that can have devastating consequences if it falls into the wrong hands.
Thankfully, their EHR systems seem to have been spared. But it's still a massive breach with potentially long-lasting repercussions for those affected. I mean, imagine having your entire medical history stolen. That's a nightmare scenario.
It is, and it highlights just how vulnerable the healthcare sector is to these kinds of attacks. Hospitals and other healthcare providers often have outdated IT systems, limited cybersecurity budgets, and a vast amount of valuable data, which makes them prime targets.
And it's not just the financial cost of these attacks that's concerning. There's also the potential for disruption of critical services, damage to reputation, and erosion of trust in the healthcare system.
It's a multifaceted problem that requires a multi-pronged approach. We need to see greater investment in cybersecurity in the healthcare sector, improved security practices, and a more collaborative approach to information sharing and threat intelligence.
Speaking of information sharing, let's talk about a case that raises some interesting questions about data privacy. Apple recently settled a lawsuit for $95 million over allegations that Siri was eavesdropping on users without their consent.
While Apple denies any wrongdoing, the case highlights the growing concerns around the privacy implications of virtual assistants and the vast amounts of data they collect.
You know, it's kind of ironic, isn't it?
Ah.
We embrace these technologies for their convenience and personalization. But in doing so, we're giving up a significant amount of privacy. Where do we draw the line between convenience and privacy in this increasingly connected world?
It's a question that we'll be grappling with for years to come. And it's not just about virtual assistants, it's about the data that's being collected by our smartphones, our smart homes, our cars, and even our wearables.
It's almost as if we're constantly being monitored and analyzed.
Yeah.
And the data is being used to manipulate our behavior, influence our decisions, and even predict our actions.
It's a chilling thought, but it's the reality we live in.
Okay. Let's move on to a story that highlights the very real threat of insider attacks. A U.S. Army soldier, Cameron John Wagenius, has been arrested for allegedly leaking confidential call records from AT&T and Verizon.
Wagenius was apparently operating under the online alias Cyberfatmeter and was linked to the Snowflake hacking campaign that targeted major corporations.
So we're not just talking about some disgruntled employee stealing data. This was a deliberate, coordinated attack with potentially far-reaching consequences.
It's a stark reminder that insider threats can come from anyone, even those we trust with sensitive information.
And it also exposes vulnerabilities in telecommunications infrastructure that we need to address.
We need to be doing more to vet employees, monitor their activity, and restrict access to sensitive data.
Absolutely. And we need to be thinking about how to build more resilient systems that can withstand these kinds of attacks. But let's switch gears and look at a story that highlights the growing trend of governments using cybersecurity as a pretext for controlling the flow of information.
Okay.
Myanmar has just enacted a new cybersecurity law that requires service providers to store user data for 3 years and bans the use of VPNs without government approval.
This is a clear attempt to stifle dissent and give the junta more control over digital spaces. It's a worrying development that could have a chilling effect on freedom of expression and access to information.
We're seeing this kind of legislation popping up all over the world, with governments using the guise of cybersecurity to justify increased surveillance and censorship.
It's a slippery slope. And we need to be vigilant in pushing back against these kinds of measures.
But let's end this segment on a slightly more positive note. Krispy Kreme, which was hit with a cyber attack back in November, has finally restored their online ordering system.
And to celebrate, they're offering some sweet New Year's deals. A little bit of sweetness in an otherwise pretty sour news cycle.
It's a good reminder that even in the face of adversity, there's always room for a little bit of joy. And maybe a glazed donut or two.
I could go for a donut right about now. It's interesting how that Krispy Kreme attack, while inconvenient for donut lovers, actually offers a valuable lesson for businesses of all sizes.
Okay. I'm intrigued. Lay it on me.
Think about it. Even a company known for delicious treats isn't immune to cyber attacks. It underscores the importance of having a robust incident response plan in place, regardless of your industry or size.
That's a really good point. It's easy to assume that only large enterprises or those dealing with highly sensitive data are targets. But the reality is anyone can be hit.
Exactly. And having a well-rehearsed plan can make all the difference in minimizing downtime, reputational damage, and financial losses.
All right, let's shift gears back to some of the heavier news. That arrest of the U.S. Army soldier for leaking call records. It really makes you question the security practices within the telecommunications industry, doesn't it?
Absolutely. If someone within the military can exploit their position to access such sensitive information, it really raises concerns about data sharing and security protocols across the board.
You know, it's not just about preventing external attacks. We often focus on firewalls and intrusion detection. But this case highlights the importance of internal controls and monitoring to mitigate insider threats.
Couldn't agree more. And it also brings up a broader question. How much data is being shared between different entities? And do we have adequate safeguards in place? It's a bit unsettling, to say the least.
Transparency and accountability are crucial here. We as users need to know who has access to our data and what steps are being taken to protect it.
Agreed. Now, let's turn our attention to the concerning situation in Myanmar. That new cybersecurity law is a pretty blatant attempt to control the flow of information and stifle dissent, wouldn't you say?
It's alarming, for sure. Mandating data storage for 3 years and banning VPNs without approval give the junta an unprecedented level of control over online activity. It feels like a huge step backward for digital freedom in the region.
It's part of a larger trend we're witnessing globally. Governments are increasingly using cybersecurity as a justification to restrict freedoms and tighten their grip on power. It's a slippery slope that we need to be very wary of.
Absolutely. Cybersecurity should never be a tool for oppression. It's crucial that we, as a global community, advocate for responsible cybersecurity practices that respect human rights and fundamental freedoms.
Well said. On a brighter note, the prediction that generative AI will revolutionize various sectors in 2025 is pretty exciting.
I'm curious to see how this plays out. The potential benefits are enormous, especially in areas like content creation, cybersecurity automation, and even drug discovery. But I can't help but feel a bit uneasy about the potential downsides.
I understand your apprehension. The rise of deepfakes and AI-powered phishing campaigns serves as a stark reminder that we need to address the ethical and security challenges posed by AI head-on.
It's not enough to simply marvel at the technological advancements. We need to have robust ethical guidelines and security measures in place to ensure that AI is used responsibly and doesn't end up causing more harm than good.
It's a call to action for everyone involved: developers, policymakers, researchers, and society as a whole, to engage in thoughtful dialogue and shape the future of AI in a way that benefits humanity.
Turning to the ransomware attack on Nikkei Universal, the sheer volume of data stolen, over 760 gigabytes, is staggering.
It's a clear indication that ransomware attacks are becoming increasingly sophisticated and targeted. These attackers aren't just after quick payouts. They're after valuable data that they can leverage for further gain.
It's a whole different ballgame now. And the fact that they set a deadline and threaten to release the data publicly just adds to the pressure on organizations to pay up. It feels like a no-win situation for the victims.
It is a very difficult position to be in. This case underscores the need for organizations to prioritize cybersecurity, not just in terms of prevention, but also in terms of incident response and recovery. Having a solid plan in place can help mitigate the damage and potentially avoid paying the ransom.
You mentioned incident response, and it's a good segue to our next topic. The emergence of global coalitions like the ISA, Global Cybersecurity Alliance, offers a glimmer of hope in the fight against increasingly sophisticated cyber attacks.
I agree. It's encouraging to see industry leaders recognizing the importance of collaboration and information sharing, especially when it comes to protecting critical infrastructure.
It's becoming clear that no single organization can tackle this alone. These kinds of initiatives, where we're sharing knowledge, developing common standards, and working together to bolster defenses, are absolutely crucial.
It's about creating a united front against a common enemy. And that brings us to another aspect of this ongoing battle: the constant need to outmaneuver those with malicious intent. The discovery of the bad Likert judge AI jailbreak technique is a perfect example.
It's like a never-ending game of cat and mouse, isn't it? As we develop new safeguards, attackers find new ways to circumvent them. And with AI, the stakes are even higher.
Absolutely. This particular technique exploits the very safety rails designed to keep large language models in check. By manipulating the way AI models are trained, attackers can trick them into generating harmful content, essentially turning these powerful tools against us.
That's scary stuff. It seems like we can't just assume AI systems are secure.
Hmm.
We need to constantly evaluate vulnerabilities, anticipate potential exploits, and stay one step ahead of those trying to weaponize these technologies.
It requires a fundamental shift in our thinking. We need to approach AI development with a security by design mindset, building in safeguards from the ground up rather than trying to bolt them on later.
And finally, the discovery of a malicious NPM package targeting Ethereum developers is a stark reminder that malicious code can lurk in unexpected places.
It's a cautionary tale for all developers, really. We need to be incredibly diligent in scrutinizing our dependencies and prioritize secure coding practices to avoid introducing vulnerabilities into our projects.
This particular package was designed to deploy the Quasar RAT, which allows attackers to remotely access and control compromised Windows systems. It's not a good situation.
And it highlights a growing trend. Attackers are targeting developers and the software supply chain to gain access to a wider range of systems and data. It's no longer enough to just secure your own infrastructure. You also need to be aware of the security practices of the software you're using.
It's about adopting a zero-trust approach to software development, where every component is treated as potentially untrustworthy until proven otherwise.
It's a fundamental shift in mindset. We can't just assume that the code we're using is safe. We need to verify, validate, and secure every step of the way.
Well said. We've covered a lot of ground today, from the somber passing of a cybersecurity pioneer to the evolving threats of ransomware, disinformation campaigns, and the weaponization of AI.
It's a lot to digest. But staying informed about these trends is crucial for anyone working in cybersecurity, or simply trying to navigate the digital world safely. Remember, knowledge is power.
You know what strikes me about all these stories is that cybersecurity isn't just about technology anymore. It's about human behavior, social engineering, and understanding how attackers exploit our natural tendencies.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. We often focus on firewalls and intrusion detection systems, but the human element remains one of the weakest links in the cybersecurity chain. Attackers know this, and they're constantly refining their techniques to manipulate us through phishing scams, social engineering, and other psychological tactics.
So it's not just about having the latest security software. It's about education, awareness,
Yeah.
and training ourselves to be more skeptical and discerning online.
Exactly. We need to be asking questions, verifying information, and not taking anything at face value. The more we understand about the tactics used by attackers, the better equipped we'll be to recognize and avoid them.
It's about being proactive,
Right.
not just reacting to threats after they've happened, but actively taking steps to minimize our risk.
Precisely. It starts with simple things like keeping our software updated, using strong and unique passwords, being cautious about what we click on and download, and generally being aware of the potential threats out there.
It might seem overwhelming at first, but even small steps can make a significant difference in improving our overall security posture.
And there are plenty of resources available to help. Websites like CybersecurityHQ provide a wealth of information, tools, and guidance to help individuals and organizations improve their cybersecurity practices.
Speaking of Cybersecurity HQ, we've got a lot more to offer than just news and analysis. We also have a thriving job board connecting cybersecurity professionals with top employers.
If you're looking to advance your career in cybersecurity, CybersecurityHQ is definitely a valuable resource.
And let's not forget our weekly newsletter, backed with insights, analysis, and trends that you won't find anywhere else. Over 70,000 professionals rely on it to stay ahead of the curve.
It's a must-read for anyone serious about cybersecurity.
Well, that about wraps it up for today's deep dive into the world of cybersecurity. We've covered a lot of ground, from the somber passing of a cybersecurity pioneer to the latest threats and trends shaping the industry.
It's a complex and ever-changing landscape. But by staying informed, being proactive, and working together, we can navigate it successfully.
So stay curious, stay vigilant, and keep learning. And remember, Cybersecurity HQ is your trusted partner in this journey.
Cybersecurity HQ, your hub for jobs, reports, news, and a newsletter read by 70,000 plus professionals weekly.